My name is Ophelia Owens, and I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks after I gave birth to my daughter, I stood in my own kitchen holding her against my shoulder while my mother told me to pack. Not asked. Told. My brother's family needed the house, she said, and I could find a rental, because I was strong, and they mattered more. She said it the way you'd read a bus schedule. There was one detail my family had managed to forget in all their planning, one line of print on one piece of paper filed at the county recorder's office. What my mother did to my daughter's nursery 2 weeks later still makes my hands cold, and what I finally said through the intercom that Sunday morning made her drop her phone on my front walk. Where the quiet ones in the family finally tell you the whole thing, start to finish, in their own steady voice. If stories about family, boundaries, and the price of finally saying no speak to you, drop a comment and subscribe. This one begins in a kitchen that belonged to me. Before that kitchen scene can mean anything, meet the girl who paid for the kitchen. So let me back up. I've been a NICU nurse in Dayton, Ohio for 12 years. Neonatal intensive care, the floor where babies the size of your hand fight for their lives and panic is a luxury we don't prescribe. I put myself through nursing school on loans and double shifts at a diner. Nobody in my family came to my pinning ceremony because my brother Brent had a baseball tournament that weekend, and in the Owens family, that's just how the math worked. I was the strong one. That was my title, my job description, and as I'd learn, my sentence. When Brent needed money for his wedding, the strong one loaned it, and we all quietly agreed. Loaned meant gave. When Dad died 2 years ago and Mom couldn't cover the apartment alone, the strong one had a spare bedroom, didn't she? When anything in that family broke, leaked, failed, or cried, the family passed it to me the way you pass a dish to the person standing closest to the sink. And here's the confession that matters, the one this whole story turns on. I liked it. Being needed was the only currency my family ever accepted from me, so I kept paying it, year after year, and told myself the invoice would eventually come back marked with love. My mother has said many things to me since March, but the truest sentence anyone ever said about me came from my friend Rosa in the hospital break room. She said, "Offie, you've been tipping people your whole life just for letting you sit at their table." It took a newborn and a moving truck to teach me she was right. The house came before the baby, and I want you to know exactly what it cost, because everyone in this story would later get very casual about that. 6 years ago, at 28, I signed for a 3-bedroom on Marigold Lane, a tired little colonial with a crooked maple and a porch that sagged like a kind old face. The down payment was night shifts. It was 6 years of Christmases worked so nurses with kids could stay home, every holiday differential, every extra weekend, a spreadsheet I kept like a prayer. My name went on the deed, my name went on the mortgage, and the first night I slept there, I lay on the floor of the empty living room, because I had a house before I had a couch, and I felt something I'd never once felt at any Owens family table. Landed. Mine. My neighbor Miss D, 70 years old and sharp as a tack, brought over cornbread the second morning and said, "A woman who buys her own house learns who she is. Honey. Usually the hard way." I laughed. I didn't know she was reading me my future. 2 years ago, when Dad died, Mom moved into the downstairs bedroom, and I never charged her a dime, never wanted to. But somewhere in those 2 years, a quiet renaming happened. At church, to her sisters, on the phone with Aunt Ruth, my house became the family house. Not Ophelia's house, the family house, as if it had been carried down a bloodline instead of carried out of my paychecks one exhausted night at a time. I noticed it. I even corrected it once or twice, gently, and got the little laugh, the wave of the hand. "You're so touchy about paperwork, Ophelia." Remember that phrase. My daughter Nora arrived on the 3rd of March, 3 weeks early, in a hurry, the way the best people often are. Her father and I had ended things back in my 5th month, quietly and for good, and I won't spend this story on him. He simply chose not to be in it. So it was me in the delivery room, and Rosa holding my hand, and then it was me and a 6-pound girl with her grandmother's stubborn chin, and I have never in my life been so terrified and so certain at the same time. Here's what people don't tell you about being a NICU nurse who becomes a mother. You know too much. You count breaths for fun, And you heal the same as everybody else, which is to say, slowly, bleeding, one-handed, on no sleep. I want to be fair about those first weeks. My mother helped. She cooked. She did laundry. She held Nora so I could shower. But help in Carol Owens's hands was never free. It was scaffolding. And scaffolding goes up around a thing so it can be worked on. She had opinions about formula, about the thermostat, about the nursery I'd painted the color of a June sky. I had learned years before how to hold a boundary with her. I'd had to. When she offered to manage my checking account after Nora came, I said no, warmly, twice. When she reorganized my kitchen, I put it back without a word. Small stuff, I told myself. Grief and grandbabies make people busy. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late March, my brother lost his house across town to the bank, and by that same afternoon, my mother had decided, without asking one question, whose house would fix it. She told me in my kitchen, which I keep saying on purpose, because she stood in it like it was hers. I was 3 weeks postpartum in a nursing tank and a robe, Nora asleep against my shoulder, warm as a loaf of bread. Mom set down her coffee, folded her hands, and made an announcement. Brent, Kayla, and the kids would be moving in the first week of May, as soon as the bank closed on their house. The children would take the upstairs rooms, meaning my room and the nursery. Brent and Kayla would need the downstairs. And I should start looking at rentals, something small, because, and I quote my own mother, "You're strong, Ophelia. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I actually laughed, one small stunned sound, because I thought, honest to God, that it was a joke. It was not a joke. I said, "Mom, this is my house." And my mother looked at me with the same tired patience she'd used on me my whole life, like I was a checkout girl disputing a coupon, and said the sentence I will hear in my head until I'm old. "Make room for your brother's family. They matter more." Right there, with my 3-week-old daughter breathing against my neck. Not "you've always managed." Not "it's temporary." None of the softeners she'd use later for the relatives. They matter more. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the maple scratching the gutter. And I did what 34 years had trained me to do. Nothing. I stood there with my mouth full of numbers, the deed, the mortgage, 6 years of night shifts, and I swallowed all of it, because the strong one doesn't make scenes. My mother picked her coffee back up, satisfied, and said Kayla would come by Thursday to see the rooms. She thought silence meant what it had always meant from me. She was about to learn otherwise. I gave it one clean adult try. That night, after Nora's 10 o'clock feed, I came downstairs, sat across from my mother, and laid it out the way I'd give report at shift change. Calm, facts in order. This house is deeded to me. The mortgage is mine. Nobody is moving in, and nobody is moving out. Least of all, a newborn in April. I said Brent had my sympathy and, if he wanted it, my help finding a rental. I thought it was generous. I thought it was over. My mother listened with her head tilted, then delivered her whole philosophy in one line. "Paperwork doesn't make a family, Ophelia. Sacrifice does." Then she informed me that the arrangements were already made, as if reality were a casserole schedule, and went to bed in the room I'd given her for free. Here's the part that turned my stomach cold, though. Around midnight, I came down for water and heard her voice through her door, on the phone with Aunt Ruth, low and easy. And my mother was reciting details. Which weekend the truck was booked. Which church friends' sons would carry furniture. How the kids' beds would fit the nursery once the crib was down. The truck was booked. Everyone. Before she ever said a word to me in that kitchen. The announcement hadn't been a conversation that went wrong. It was a courtesy call. The next morning, Kayla added me to a group chat called Moving Day with a little truck emoji. 11 relatives already in it. A date already pinned. The first Sunday of May. I stood in my bathroom, running a thumb over my C-section scar, doing a kind of math no spreadsheet can hold. Then I called my brother, because some part of me still believed in him. Brent is 29, 5 years behind me, and I practically raised him through Mom's long shifts after Dad's first layoff, walked him to school, taught him to parallel park, co-signed nothing for him ever again after the wedding loan. I called him at lunch and kept my voice kind. I said, "Brent, I'm so sorry about the house. I know how scared you must be. And I need you to hear me directly, not through Mom. You can't move into my home. I will help you find a place. I'll even help with a deposit. But this house has a 3-week-old in it, and it's not available. There was a long pause, and in it I could hear Kayla's television in the background, and then my little brother said, in a voice I barely knew, "Mom already promised us fee. The kids are excited about the yard." And when I said gently that it wasn't Mom's to promise, he sighed like I was the difficult one, like I was traffic, and said the family line. "You're the strong one. You'll be fine anywhere. It's different for us." I got off that phone and understood something with the specific clarity you get in triage. My brother was not going to save me, because my brother had never once had to save anyone. That had always been my shift. Aunt Ruth called an hour later, sugar-voiced, asking if I'd really let my nephews sleep in a shelter, which nobody was in danger of. Brent had 2 job offers and a severance. By supper, cousins I hadn't heard from in years knew a version of the story where I was hoarding a big empty house against homeless children. The family narrative machine was running, and I had spent my whole life feeding that machine my own explanations and watching it grind them into whatever shape Mom needed. So I stopped explaining. I went upstairs, opened the fireproof box in my closet, and read my own name on the deed, twice, under the lamp. I started reading everything after that. Nurses' unions are good for many things, and one of them is a legal helpline nobody uses until their life catches fire. I called it on my next feed and fold afternoon, Nora asleep on my chest, notepad on my knee, and a patient attorney named Miss Alvarez walked me through the landscape of my own home like a surveyor. "Ohio," she said. "Your mother has lived there 2 years, receives mail there, that makes her a resident, likely a tenant at will. You cannot change the locks on her. You cannot set her bags on the lawn, no matter whose name is on the deed. If you want her out, it's written notice, 30 days, delivered properly, then court if she stays. Do it clean, or it comes back on you." I wrote it all down like discharge instructions. Then she said the other half, the half that mattered more. "Your brother and his family are a different species entirely. They don't live there. They have never lived there. If they show up, they are guests, and a guest enters your home exactly as long as you allow it and not 1 minute longer. If they try to move in without your consent, that's not a family matter. That's trespass, and you can stand behind your locked door and call the non-emergency line with a clear conscience." I thanked her and sat for a while in the quiet, Nora's breath ticking against me like a small clock. My family had a truck, a group chat, 11 relatives, and a story where they were owed my home. I had a piece of paper and a process. Miss Alvarez had said one more thing before she hung up. "Your mother has rights, and so do you, hun. The only question in these cases is which of you is willing to actually use them." What came next wasn't shouting. Shouting I could have handled. I grew up on it. Worked emergency rooms. Shouting is weather. What came was warmer and much worse. The shame arrived in casseroles and scripture and voicemails that began with "Sweetheart." Aunt Ruth, twice a day, reminding me that family is all we have, that my mother buried a husband, that those babies of Brent's used to ask about their auntie. My mother's church friend Eileen, who I have met 3 times, calling to say she was praying for my heart to soften. Kayla posting in the group chat, a photo of her boys on an air mattress, caption, "Can't wait for the big yard. So blessed." Every message had the same architecture. Nobody argued I didn't own the house. Ownership was simply treated as a rude detail, the way you don't mention how the sausage gets made at a church breakfast. And the campaign leaned its whole weight on the oldest beam in my personality, the load-bearing one. Ophelia handles things. Ophelia doesn't make it worse. 12 years in a NICU teaches you a very particular discipline, though. When a situation deteriorates, you do not match its energy, you chart it. So I became a nurse about my own family. I saved every voicemail. I screenshotted the group chat, dated everything, kept a small spiral notebook by the coffee maker with times and quotes, not because a judge would ever care about Aunt Ruth's opinion of my heart, but because writing a thing down is how you stop it from rewriting you at 2 in the morning. My hands wanted to explain, apologize, smooth. Instead, they documented. The strong one was still working the case, But for the first time in her life, the patient was herself. The Thursday visit told me how far ahead of me they already were. Kayla came to see the rooms, which I permitted, 10 civil minutes, because some part of me was still performing reasonable for the committee. She walked my upstairs with her phone out, taking photos of my bedroom, of the nursery, narrating closet space to Brent on speaker. At the door, leaving, she jingled her keys at me, little friendly wave. And on her ring, between a gym fob and a grocery tag, sat a brass key I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. My front door key. I asked, evenly, where she'd gotten it. Oh, Mom Carol had copies made weeks ago, she said, breezy as a forecast. For convenience. You know, for the transition. Weeks ago, I stood in my doorway doing quiet arithmetic while she drove off. Weeks ago was before the foreclosure was even final, which meant the plan predated the emergency, which meant the emergency was the excuse, not the cause. That night, the group chat buzzed on, and a message meant for a sister-in-law landed in the main thread by mistake. Kayla, to everyone, with a laughing emoji. Brent measured the little blue room last Tuesday. Crib won't fit both boys. It'll have to come down anyway. Last Tuesday. My brother had been inside my house with a tape measure in my daughter's nursery while I was at her pediatrician appointment, and my mother had let him in with a smile and never said a word to me. I looked at the brass key hook by my own door, at the neat row of spares I'd hung there like a trusting fool, and I felt the house shift around me. Not mine, apparently. Occupied. The only question left was the date. I tried my mother one more time, and I tried it honestly. Sunday evening, Nora asleep, the two of us at the kitchen table with tea, the same table where she'd made her announcement. I asked her the question I'd been swallowing since I was 9 years old. Mom, when I was putting myself through school on diner shifts, where were you? When Dad died and I took you in, who else offered? I've been strong my whole life because there was never anyone standing behind me. So why is it that being strong only ever means I get less? My mother looked at me for a long moment, and I watched something move behind her eyes, something old, and for 1 second I thought we might actually meet each other. Then it closed. You're the strong one, she said, like it was tender, like it was a compliment being wasted on an ungrateful child. Brent isn't built like you. He needs the ground held for him. You never did. There it was, the family religion, recited in my own kitchen. The strong one needs nothing. The strong one is a resource, not a relative. She reached across and patted my hand and said something that would only make sense to me later, at the door, with a box in her arms. My mother said, "You think I don't know what it costs. I know better than you ever will." I didn't understand her yet. I was too tired, too sore, too busy being furious in my quiet way. But hold on to that sentence, the way I held on to it, because in a few weeks she would open it up for me like a locket, and inside it would be a farm in Pribble County and a girl I never met. Then the practical squeeze began, because shame alone wasn't closing the deal. My maternity leave had 5 weeks left on it, half paid. The mortgage didn't care. My emergency fund had survived the birth, but not by much. Single moms don't get to have a hospital bill. And my mother, who had been holding Nora every morning so I could sleep 1 merciful extra hour, suddenly got very busy. She had church, she had Ruth, she had a headache. If I needed so much help, she observed, standing in my kitchen in her coat. Maybe I shouldn't be so eager to empty the house of family. There it was, the net being pulled up, slowly, so I could watch. She wasn't just declining to help, she was pricing it. Childcare, casseroles, a grandmother's arms at 3 a.m, all of it available again the moment I surrendered the keys. I want to be honest with you, because this is the part nobody says out loud. It almost worked. I was 6 weeks postpartum, underslept in a way that feels like being underwater, doing daycare math against a nurse's salary, and there was a version of the surrender that I could dress up as love. Family under one roof, cousins for Nora, my mother's hands back. All it would cost was everything I'd built and the last of whatever I was. What held the line wasn't courage, I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was Rosa, who started showing up Tuesdays and Fridays with groceries and no commentary, and Miss D, who took to sitting on her porch facing my driveway like a small knitting lighthouse. 2 women, neither of them blood, holding more of my weight than my entire family. I noticed who was actually carrying me. I wrote that down too. Nora's 6-week checkup fell on a Thursday morning. Perfect weight, strong lungs. The pediatrician called her a linebacker in a onesie, and for 1 full hour I was just a proud mother in a paper-curtained room. No group chat, no casseroles, no keys. We got home early, a little after 11. The garage door was open. My mother's car was in the drive, and Kayla's SUV was behind it, and I walked into my garage carrying my daughter in her car seat and stopped like I'd hit glass. My daughter's crib was in the garage, taken down, disassembled into white rails and slats, stacked neat as lumber against the paint cans. The mattress leaned beside it with the fitted sheet, clouds and little yellow moons still on it. Her mobile, the felt stars I'd hung while 9 months pregnant and crying at nothing, coiled in a hardware store bag on top. Inside, upstairs, I could hear my mother's voice in the blue room, bright and hostessy, telling Kayla where the boys' bunk beds would go once the wall had a fresh coat, something less babyish. They hadn't waited for the first of the month. They hadn't waited for me. My mother had taken apart my sleeping daughter's bed, in the house I owned, while I sat in a pediatrician's office being told my girl was thriving. I did not go upstairs. I stood in the cool of the garage, one hand on the car seat handle, and I put my other hand flat on the crib rail. White paint I had sanded myself in August, and the strangest calm came down over me, the triage calm, the one that arrives when the monitors go bad and there is no more room for feelings, only for the next correct action. I looked down at Nora, asleep, lashes like commas, and I whispered it, for the first time, just to her. This is my house. Here's what I did not do, and 12 years of night shifts get the credit. I did not scream. I did not carry the crib rails inside and make a scene for Kayla's phone camera, which, believe me, was hungry for one. A clip of unstable Ophelia would have fed that group chat for a year. I carried my daughter inside, past the blue room where my mother was mid-sentence about paint, and I said, pleasantly, "There's coffee in the pot," and went to my room and closed the door. And in that room, with Nora on my chest, I finally did the thing the strong one had never been allowed to do. I triaged my own family. Black tag, red tag, green tag. Who can be saved? Who is beyond it? Who is walking wounded? My brother, red tag. Salvageable maybe. Someday. In a different room of his life. But not by me. And not today. Aunt Ruth and the chorus. Black tag gone. You don't spend compressions on people who were never breathing for you. And my mother, who I had loved with the specific desperate love of a daughter still auditioning at 34. I sat there a long time on that one. Then I looked at my sleeping daughter, 6 weeks old, who would one day be somebody's the strong one if I didn't break this thing, this heirloom, this rule the Owens women kept passing down the line like a christening gown soaked in something. And I tagged the audition, not the woman. The audition was over. I picked up my phone, and I did not text the group chat. I texted the locksmith whose magnet had been on my fridge for 6 years, and Miss Alvarez's extension, and Rosa. 3 messages, short ones, the kind you send when the plan is already whole. Let me stop here and ask you something, one tired woman to another. If you've ever been the strong one in your family, the one who handles it, tell me in the comments what it cost you, because I know I'm not the only one. And if this story is hitting somewhere real, subscribe and stay with me. The truck is coming. I made one final offer in writing because I wanted the record to show who tried. I texted Brent and copied Mom, calm as a discharge summary. I've found 3 rentals within 2 miles of the boys' school. I will pay your first 2 months' deposit myself tomorrow, as a gift. That's what I can do, and I can do it with love. What I cannot do is give you this house. Nora's home is not on the table. I attached the listings, actual links, actual square footage, a real bridge to a real solution, more than anyone had offered me in 34 years. Kayla replied with a thumbs down on the deposit offer, which told me everything about what this had ever been about, because people fleeing a housing emergency do not vote down 2 months free rent. They didn't want shelter. They wanted mine. Then my mother came upstairs and stood in my doorway with a face I'd never seen pointed at me before, the one she saved for waitresses who got the order wrong. "A deposit," she said. "You'd pay strangers' rent to keep your own blood out." "Family is not a lease agreement, Ophelia," I said quietly. That it wasn't the stranger's rent, it was Brent's. And that she was right. Family isn't a lease, because a lease gets honored. She didn't laugh. She straightened and issued her verdict, cold and final as a stamp. "They move in the first Sunday of May. Be reasonable and keep the small room. Or don't. That's your choice." Everything in this family, I noticed, was always my choice, right after they'd made it. She walked back downstairs. I sat on my bed, listening to my house not being mine, and I thought, all right, Sunday. Now we both have a date. That week brought the blow I still can't fully forgive, and it didn't come from my mother. Or maybe it did. I'll never prove it. Wednesday, 10 in the morning, a knock, and a polite woman with a lanyard and a clipboard on my porch. County Children's Services. Someone had called in a concern for infant welfare, citing an unstable living situation, a mother behaving erratically, possible postpartum crisis. She was kind and thorough, and she did her job, which is a sentence I can say now with my blood pressure intact. She saw a clean house, a full pantry, a thriving 6-week-old with a folder of pediatric records her mother could produce in 90 seconds because that mother charts things for a living. 20 minutes? Closed? Unfounded? "Have a good day, ma'am." I shut the door and shook for 1 hour straight. Because understand what had just been attempted. Someone in my family, had aimed the machinery of the state at me, at my daughter, on a phone call, as a pressure tactic in a real estate dispute they were losing. In the group chat that afternoon, Aunt Ruth posted, unprompted, "Well, some people are clearly under too much strain to be making big decisions alone," and my mother replied with a praying hands emoji, and I sat with my notebook and wrote down the time. If there had been any road back, any Sunday dinner future where we all pretended spring never happened, it closed that Wednesday. They hadn't just tried to take the house. They'd tried, even just for 20 minutes, to reclassify me as a danger to the person I love most alive. You don't negotiate with that. You don't leave your flank open to it twice. Come Sunday, there would be nothing about me left unlocked. Thursday night, after the 10 o'clock feed, I sat at the kitchen table with 3 documents and did the quietest violence of my life. First, the notice. Miss Alvarez had walked me through it. 30 days. Written, dated, proper. To Carol Owens, you are hereby asked to vacate the premises at 414 Marigold Lane. My hand didn't shake until the signature, and then it did, and I let it, and signed anyway, and it occurred to me that some signatures end a marriage and some end a childhood, and mine was the second kind. I set it on the table where she takes her morning tea, next to the pot, because I am my mother's daughter and presentation matters. Second, the locksmith's card. Appointment held for the moment the law allowed it, not 1 hour before, because I was going to do every step of this clean enough to survive an audit by God himself. Third, the non-emergency number, saved to favorites, and a folder by the front door. Deed, mortgage statement, notice copy, my ID, rubber banded like a go bag for a disaster you can hear coming up the street. Then I sat in my dark kitchen, in the house I bought at 28, and let myself grieve for exactly 1 pot of tea. Not for the house was safe now or would be. For the version of my mother I had been inventing since I was a little girl, the one who was going to look up one day and see me, actually see me, and say, "You've done so much. Sit down, I'll carry it from here." I buried her that night at the kitchen table. The real one would find the paperwork at breakfast. Some locks, once changed, change you. I signed knowing that, and slept better than I had in weeks. My mother found the notice at 7:15 the next morning. I know because I was feeding Nora in the rocker upstairs, and the house went a very particular kind of silent, the silence of someone reading. I had braced for the eruption, and I want you to understand that what she did instead was so much more skillful. Nothing. No shout up the stairs, No torn paper. By the time I came down, she was at the counter in her good coat, suitcase packed, tea unpoured, the notice folded neatly beside the pot like an RSVP she was declining. She said, with the serenity of a saint on a holy card, "I won't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll be at Ruth's. When you come to your senses, you know the number." Then she kissed Nora on the head, not me, and wheeled her suitcase down my front walk with her spine straight as a fence post, pausing, and I swear this is true, to wave at Miss D's porch, ensuring a witness. It was masterful. She'd converted a legal notice she couldn't fight into a banishment she could perform. By noon, the family version was everywhere. Ophelia served her own widowed mother papers like a stranger, drove her out with a notice on the breakfast table, and the group chat lit with broken hearts. My phone buzzed all day like a hornet in a jar. Here's what I felt, and I'll be honest because I promised. Relief. First, God help me. The downstairs bedroom door standing open, the house breathing easier. Then grief. Then something almost like admiration. The bleak professional kind, one operator recognizing another. She'd left 12 days early to control the story. What she didn't know was that her leaving had just simplified mine. That evening, Miss D came across the yard with soup and sat in my kitchen like a small tribunal of one. She's 70, buried 2 husbands, raised 4 kids in that house of hers, and she doesn't do preamble. She said, "Your aunt called Darlene from the church about you, and Darlene called me. Want to know what they're saying?" I said not really, and she nodded, approving, and told me anyway, because information is ammunition, and she's generous with ammunition. Then she put her spoon down and delivered a small speech I intend to have framed. "Honey, I've watched you shovel that walk alone for 6 years. I watched you come home from night shift and mow at 7 in the morning, big as a house in July, because that grass wasn't going to cut itself. I never once saw a brother. I never once saw a moving truck full of help. I know whose house this is, and so does everybody on this street who has eyes. Let them talk in their group chat. The neighborhood has a group chat too, and you'd be surprised who's on it." I laughed for the first time in what felt like a month. A real one. Ugly and loud. And Nora startled, and we both laughed harder. It mattered more than I can explain. Not because I needed a jury, but because shame dies in daylight, and Miss D was daylight with a soup pot. Before she left, she looked at my new deadbolt, at the folder by the door, and said the thing that stuck. "You've been asking permission your whole life from people who were never going to give it. Locks are just a way of no longer asking." Sunday, she said. She'd be on her porch early, knitting, watching. The locksmith came Saturday morning. My mother had left of her own accord, taken her things, announced her residence at Ruth's to the entire family, and texted me, in writing, "Don't wait on me. I don't live where I'm not wanted." Miss Alvarez confirmed it. Abandonment of the tenancy. Clean. Her rights ended when she surrendered them for the performance. So the locks changed. Front, back, garage. New brass, stiff and bright, and a video doorbell with an intercom speaker, which Rosa helped me install off a tutorial. 2 nurses with a drill, 1 baby monitor propped on the porch rail supervising. I dropped the old spare keys in a drawer. Useless now. Little dead teeth. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be exact about this. Changing the locks on your childhood is not a victory lap. It's a tourniquet. You do it because the alternative is bleeding out. And it hurts the whole time it saves you. That afternoon, Brent texted, "We're coming Sunday to talk. All of us. Kayla's boxes are already in the truck, Fee. Don't make this ugly." I looked at that message a long time. My brother's version of diplomacy. Boxes already loaded. I typed and deleted several drafts of the old Ophelia, the explainer, the apologizer, the offerer of context and deposits. Then I sent what was true. "There's nothing to talk about at my house. The deposit offer stands through Friday. I love you. Don't come." He read it at 4:12 and didn't reply. That night I fed Nora at 2, at 5, and between feeds I lay awake listening to my house, my quiet, mine, and somewhere across town, a truck sat loaded pointing at us. She came back once before the end, my mother, alone, on Thursday, for the last box from the downstairs room. I could have left it on the porch. I didn't. I let her in. Watched. Because some appointments your heart insists on keeping. She got the box, and at the front door she stopped. And without me asking, standing in the doorway with cardboard in her arms, my mother finally opened the locket. When I was 19, she said, my parents signed the farm over to your Uncle Walt. Preble County, 160 acres. I'd milked that parlor since I was 8. Walt was 17 and couldn't keep a tomato alive. But he was the boy, and the farm goes to the boy. That's what my mother told me in the kitchen, the same way you'd say rain's coming. She said, I stood there holding your Uncle Dale on my hip, because I was always holding somebody, and I watched them sign, and then I set the table for supper. Nobody made room for me either, Ophelia. I carried it. That's what women do. And for one long moment I saw her whole, 19 and strong and invisible, standing in a kitchen watching her inheritance walk to a boy who didn't want it, and my anger had to move over and make space for something worse, which is understanding. My mother wasn't the author of this. She was a page in it, and she'd spent 40 years insisting the sentence that broke her was grammar. I said softly, they were wrong, Mom, and you're doing it to me. She looked at me, adjusted the box on her hip, and said, it kept our family together, and walked to her car. The door closed. Both of them. Rosa came Friday with groceries and stayed to ask the only question that still needed asking. She unpacked oranges like it was her own kitchen and said, okay, walk me through Sunday, and don't give me the nurse voice. So I laid out the price sheet, because I'd run it 100 times in the dark. If I held the line, I kept the house, and I likely lost my mother. Not for a season. Maybe for good. Women like Carol Owens do not forgive being survived. I'd be the villain at every funeral and wedding for a decade, the daughter who chose paperwork over people. Brent's boys would grow up on a story about mean Aunt Ophelia. And if I folded, I'd have my mother's hands back, and Sunday dinners, and the wide, warm lie of family under one roof, and the deed would still say Owens, just the wrong one eventually, and my daughter would inherit the christening gown, the one soaked in it. The strong ones rule. They matter more. Rosa listened, bagging the oranges into the bowl, and then she asked it. No nurse voice either. Someday Nora's going to hear this whole story, Fee, probably from you, in that kitchen right there. Which version do you want to be telling her? And there it was. Not whether I could survive being hated. I've been strong my whole life. I can survive anything. That was never the question. The question was, which story got told in this kitchen in 20 years, and who my daughter would learn to be while listening to it? Rent payer or homeowner? I picked up my phone, and I did not text anyone. I just checked the doorbell battery. Full. Good. Some prayers are just logistics said, kneeling. Before Sunday comes, I want your honest answer, not the polite one. Standing in my kitchen, mother on one side, deed on the other. Would you have opened that door? Tell me in the comments. Truly, no judgment. Some of you have carried exactly this. And if you're new here, subscribe. The truck arrives in the morning. Saturday night, after the 10 o'clock feed, I couldn't sleep. And for once, it wasn't dread. It was inventory. The body walking the halls counting what it loves. So at 2 in the morning, I did the thing I'd been saving. I went to the garage and I carried my daughter's crib back upstairs, piece by piece, white rails cool from the concrete, and I rebuilt it in the blue room where it belonged. Allen key, wing nuts, the little diagram I didn't need because I'd built it once already, 9 months pregnant, weeping at the instructions, which said assembly requires 2 people, and I remember saying out loud to the empty room, well, it's got 2, and patting my own belly. This time, nobody cried. I worked in lamplight with the door open so I could hear Nora's monitor, and every bolt I seated felt like a sentence being finished. My mother had taken this bed apart in an afternoon, easy as a pinion. Putting it back took me 40 minutes and 12 years and everything I had unlearned since March. When it stood, I put the cloud sheet back on the little mattress, wound the mobile, felt stars, and let it turn once, plinking its tune into the 2 a.m. quiet. And I sat down on the floor of my daughter's room in my house and looked at it the way you look at a campfire. Downstairs, the new locks held the doors. Across town, a loaded truck. In the morning, my family was coming to take this room, and the room stood ready, small and blue and completely spoken for. I checked the phone one last time. Kayla, in the group chat, to everyone, 9 a.m. Aunt Ruth's coming too. Pray for a peaceful day. I put the phone face down. Amen. They say soldiers sleep before battles, and I finally believe it, because I slept 4 straight hours and woke before the alarm, clear as glass. Sunday. I fed Nora at 5 in the gray light, her hand curled around my finger, and I looked out at the yard, the walk I'd shoveled alone for 6 winters, the maple I'd paid a man too much to trim, the grass I'd mowed enormous and pregnant in July. Every square foot of that view had my receipts on it. I did not rehearse anything. There was nothing to rehearse. That was the whole discovery of that spring. I'd spent 34 years drafting explanations for people who never read them, and I was done writing that genre. Instead, I did a nurse's morning. Shower. Coffee. Checked the folder by the door. Deed. Mortgage statement. Copy of the notice. ID. Checked the doorbell camera angle. The intercom volume. Tested it once with Rosa by text. Checked my own vitals. Hands steady. Breath even. Heart a little fast. Acceptable for the acuity of the shift ahead. Then I dressed us both. Nora in the yellow duck onesie because courage comes in sizes, me in actual clothes with actual buttons, and at 8:40 I stood in my kitchen with my daughter against my shoulder and the morning sun coming through the window over the sink, and the house was so quiet I could hear the maple against the gutter, same sound as March, same kitchen, different woman. I had opened doors for these people my whole life. Open them smiling, open them tired, open them bleeding. I had never once, not one single time in 34 years, tried the other thing. At 8:51, an engine turned onto Marigold Lane, pulling something heavy. I moved my thumb to the intercom and waited for the knock. The U-Haul took 2 passes to park, which gave the street time to notice. Behind it came Kayla's SUV, then Ruth's sedan, a little convoy of certainty. From the kitchen window, I watched them arrange themselves on my front walk like a family portrait. Brent in a ball cap, already looking tired. Kayla pointing the boys toward the yard. Go play. This'll just be a minute. Aunt Ruth in her church coat, arms crossed, stationed like a witness at an execution. And in the center, my mother, Carol Owens, in her good spring jacket, hair set, standing on the walk of the house she'd left 9 days ago with her phone already in her hand, dialing, because the plan was obvious and almost touching in its confidence. Mom calls, Ophelia softens, the door opens, the truck empties, and by supper the story writes itself. Family reunited, and all it ever took was everyone simply assuming, one more time, that I would fold. Across the street, right on schedule, Miss D's screen door creaked, and she settled into her porch chair with her knitting, a one-woman jury with excellent sightlines. Nobody knocked yet. That's a detail I'll keep forever. They didn't knock first. Brent lowered the truck's ramp, metal on metal, loud on purpose, and Kayla propped my porch's screen door open with a box, my screen door, held open by their belongings. And only then, with the unloading already begun, did my mother press call. The performance was never open with us. It was open for us. Inside, on the counter, my phone lit up and began to buzz, her name on the screen, Mom. The photo from Nora's first week, her smiling down at my sleeping daughter. Nora stirred against my shoulder. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Her voice came through warm. That's the thing I'd forgotten to armor against. The warmth. The one from fevers and skinned knees. From before I understood the pricing model, and she spent it all on that call. Every saved-up drop. Ophelia. Sweetheart. Look out your window. It's everybody. It's your whole family. Enough now. Open the door and everything goes back to how it was. I'll come home. I'll help with the baby. Sundays, like before. You're my daughter. All you have to do is open the door and you're my good girl again. I stood at my kitchen window with the phone at my ear, and I'm going to be honest with you about that moment, because I promised honesty from the first minute. It landed. Every syllable found the girl who'd waited 34 years for that exact tone aimed at her. Through the glass, I watched my mother, silver head bowed to the phone, and behind her, my brother on the ramp of a truck full of a life that was supposed to replace mine, and I felt the pull like tide, the sweet old undertow, one yes, one turned latch. And I'd be inside the family again, warm and fed and owned. Nora made a small sound against my shoulder, milk and sleep, the sound of a person whose entire world is whoever is holding her. Want and need. My mother's love back, or the woman my daughter would grow up watching. I'd finally learned they were not the same purchase. "Mom," I said, and my voice was even, and she went quiet, hopeful. "I'm going to hang up now. There's a speaker by the door." And I ended the call, set the phone gently on the counter, and walked with my daughter to the intercom panel. Through the doorbell camera, the fisheye showed them all, my mother closest, phone still raised, staring at it, Brent halfway up the walk with a box labeled Boys' Room in Kayla's handwriting, Ruth's chin lifted for the confrontation she'd dressed for. I stood in my front hall, Nora against my shoulder, thumb over the button, and it's true what they say about clarity. It doesn't feel like lightning. It feels like a room finally at its right temperature. I pressed the intercom. Outside, the little speaker crackled, loud enough for the walk, the ramp, the porch across the street, and I said it, even and unhurried, the sentence I'd whispered to my daughter in the garage over her dismantled crib. "This is my house. That's all." I didn't list the mortgage payments. I didn't cite the deed book and page, though I know them by heart. I didn't say what 34 years had cost or read the receipts I'd been drafting since March, because explanation was the tax I'd been paying my whole life, and the audit was over. One short sentence into a $9 speaker. On the camera, I watched my mother's face do something I had never seen it do. Stop. The script died in her hand. She looked at the speaker, then up at the door she'd swept past for 2 years, the kitchen she'd commanded, the walk she'd waved from like a hostess. And I watched it land, physically land, that the door was not going to open, that her daughter, the reliable one, the strong one, the yes-shaped one, had a working lock and a spine behind it. Her hand loosened, her phone dropped, hit the brick edging of my flower bed, and cracked face down on the walk, glass on stone, sharp as a bell in the Sunday quiet. Nobody picked it up. The boys stopped on the lawn and looked. Brent set down the box marked Boys' Room very slowly, like it had suddenly tripled in weight, which, in a way, it had. Ruth surged for the doorbell, jabbed it, leaned in, hollering about family and shame and the street hearing all of it. Exactly as I'd expected, so I did the only thing left on my checklist. Calmly, evenly, I said, "You're on camera, you're trespassing, and the police have already been called." Then I stepped back from the speaker and let the morning do its work. The non-emergency officers arrived in 11 minutes, no lights, no drama, 2 professionals on a Sunday shift who had clearly seen 100 driveways like mine. I opened the door for them, only for them, first turn of the new lock, and handed over the folder, deed, mortgage, the notice. My mother's own text about not living where she isn't wanted. One officer read, the other listened to Ruth deliver a sermon about what family used to mean in this country. It took a quarter of an hour to unwind. That's the part the movies never show you, how administrative the end of a war is. The officer explained to my brother, patiently, that ownership wasn't in dispute. The county's records were a phone screen away, that nobody currently resided there but the owner and her child, and that they needed to load their ramp and go. Brent went first, and this is the detail that told me who he'd always been. He seemed relieved. Ordered off my property, my little brother looked lighter, because a uniform had finally taken the decision out of everyone's hands, which was the only place Brent had ever been comfortable keeping decisions. Kayla loaded her propping box back into the truck with her jaw set for a story she was already editing. Ruth announced she would pray for me, and the officer said that was allowed from the sidewalk. And my mother. My mother stood one more minute after the truck's engine caught, alone on my front walk, cracked phone in her hand now, looking at the door. Through the camera I watched her, and my thumb rested on the intercom, one press away from something, an apology, a goodbye, a benediction. I don't know what. I didn't press it. Forgiveness and an open door are different sacraments. She got in Ruth's sedan, and the street emptied, and it was over. When the last engine faded off Marigold Lane, I unlocked my door and stepped out onto my own porch with my daughter, into the ridiculous, ordinary sunshine, and the neighborhood was pretending very hard not to have watched, curtains resettling, a lawnmower starting somewhere out of respect. On the walk, in the flower bed brick, a small spray of phone glass glittered like the world's saddest confetti. I'd sweep it up later. Mine to sweep, like everything else on that walk. And for the first time, the thought arrived without any bitterness attached. Just fact. Warm as the railing under my hand. Across the street, Miss D lowered her knitting, looked at me over her glasses for a long moment, and lifted her coffee mug about an inch, the way you'd toast a ship coming into harbor. No fuss. All meaning. "Coffee's on," she called, "whenever you two are ready." And that's when I cried. Not during the announcement in March. Not in the garage over the crib. Not signing the notice. Not with my thumb on that intercom button. Through all of that, my eyes had stayed as dry as triage. I cried on my own porch in the sunshine with my daughter waking up against my neck. And it wasn't loss. Or not only. It was the specific, bone-deep weeping of a woman who has set down something she'd carried so long she'd grown around it. The strong one, it turns out, was never the one who carried everything. She was the one who finally learned what to put down. I wiped my face, kissed my daughter's head, and we went across the street for coffee. 6 weeks later, the dust had chosen its patterns. Brent and Kayla took an apartment 2 miles from the boys' school, one of the exact listings I'd sent, and my 2 months' deposit went through on a payment app, accepted within the hour, no thank you attached. I didn't need one. The accepting was the sentence. My mother stayed at Ruth's a while, then moved in with Brent and Kayla, and by August I was hearing, through the cousins who quietly kept speaking to me, that she had opinions about Kayla's kitchen organization and the boys' bedtimes, and whose name was on that lease. And I confess there are evenings I think about that arrangement, my mother and Kayla under one roof, both of them certain, and I have to put my tea down. The family split the way families do. Not in half, in fractions. Ruth's wing went silent toward me, which was quieter than I expected and easier than I feared. But an aunt I barely knew mailed a onesie. A cousin dropped a stroller on my porch with a note. No message, just, "This served us well. The quiet ones, voting the only way quiet people vote, by parcel." At work, I went back part-time, and Rosa's Tuesday-Friday grocery runs downgraded to Friday wine. And here is the accounting I owe you plain. It cost what I said it would cost. My mother has not apologized. Women like her don't. The language isn't installed. I am the villain in a story being told at tables I'm no longer invited to, and some nights that still aches like weather in an old fracture. "You're the strong one," they always said, meaning, "You can take it," meaning, "We don't have to ask." They were half right. I could take it. Strong was never a reason to take things from someone, though. It was just their excuse, and I've retired it from my house. In September, a letter came, my mother's handwriting, the careful cursive of a woman taught penmanship by nuns. No apology in it. I'll save you the suspense. 2 pages about the weather at Brent's, about the boys, and 1 sentence at the end doing all the work. Whatever you think of me, I am still your mother. I read it twice at the kitchen table, then put it in the box where I keep Nora's hospital bracelet, because both of those things are true at once, and neither one opens a door. I looked over at my daughter in her swing, fists boxing the mobile, mighty and 8 pounds, and I said out loud, to her, to the kitchen, to every Owens woman who ever set a table while her inheritance walked past her, she matters more. The door stays locked. The mail slot works fine. If you carry one thing out of my story, carry this. Love that has to be paid like rent will never buy you a home, so build the home first, on your own name, and then let in only the people who knock softly. I spent 34 years tipping my own family for the privilege of a chair, and the day I stopped paying, I found out the chair had been mine the whole time. Think of where this story lived. A crib disassembled in a garage, a brass key that stopped turning. One short sentence through a $9 speaker, and a phone cracking on a front walk in the Sunday quiet. If you're the strong one in your family, if your yes has been collected so long they've stopped asking, hear me from my porch. Your name on your own life is not selfishness. It's a deed. If this story steadied you, subscribe and tell me in the comments what you've finally put down. I read every one. Until next time, keep your locks kind and your boundaries kinder.